Okay guys, welcome to this video. This video is going to be basically another entry into the F-14 Hall of Shame for how to fly this thing. Basically I'm going to do a carrier deck landing. Obviously I've got to get off here first. It's going to be a carrier deck catapult launch and then a landing. I have to say, every time I look at this I think this is just such a gorgeous, well modelled aircraft. It's fantastic with all the streaks, the weathering coming down here. It's just, the exterior model is glorious. However, to the case in point, 400-foot cloud base with 3/4 of a mile visibility in the cloud, extending all the way up to 4,000 feet. As a result of that cloud base, it means it is impossible to do a normal visual landing in a visual circuit. So with that in mind, we are now destined to have a look at what we can do instead. And what we can do is we can do our automated carrier landing system. Okay, so back inside, I've preset a couple of bits up. Okay, so the TACAN's preset up with a carrier, which would be expected because that's what we're departing from. My guess would be it's standard practice that you have that set up anyway, particularly in the bad weather. So all the controls are full and free movement, all ready to go. The flaps are fully down. The intake ramp doors are auto. Stops us having a flame out when we launch. T's and P's are all looking good. The HUD is set up with the ACLS. I like it because it's got a different steering cues. It's got better steering cues and you can use it for this. The next thing is I've got the vertical display indicator, which is set up as standard. It's actually on ACL. Supposedly both of these are supposed to be on ACL, but I do like the steering indications of the ACLS here, and they do work with the ACL, Automatic Carrier Landing System. This is just a bog standard nav display. It's got steer commands in relation to all of this of AWL, All Weather Landing, P3D. Precision controlled descent, I would imagine that means. I don't know. I haven't actually investigated that little number, but there we go. One caution warning light on the carrot salad, which tells me the launch bar's down. Bleed airs to both generators, both on, all closed and guarded. We will put auto ice onto icing onto auto, and we're ready to go. I haven't got track IR fitted, and I'm not using it. The reason is you will see the intensity of what I'm trying to do, and the idea of having my head bobbling around whilst I'm trying to do that is just terrifying. Without further ado, we'll get airborne and we'll position ourselves and go out into basically a large graceful downwind. Gear up, flaps up, and off we go. So all we're going to do is a big curving turn around to the left to position ourselves for a downwind initially, and then on to get out of the cloud as well whilst we're at it. Whilst I think about it, get ourselves some nice references. 4,000 feet allegedly, the cloud tops. I say allegedly, I'd say allegedly in real life. In reality, it's a sim. I know they're exactly 4,000 feet. So I know as I climb out, I am going to meet them and encounter them. Okay, you can see on the left of the green display, it's got the landing check light illuminated. That basically means that we are within an acceptable range of the carrier to be receiving its signals. If the criteria weren't being met, then you would see the white token somewhere further down called voice, somewhere about here, which basically means that you're not receiving any instrument signals, it's voice only. There we go, 4,000 feet, look at that. Okay, so let's get ourselves level just while we prep the rest of the aircraft. Okay, now for the criteria for getting this landing to work, the system to engage, you need a lot of things. The first thing you need is you need this here, which brings on, if you've got it, shift 7 does it, by the way? A nice little aid. It also brings on AP ref, which tells you that you're all set up. Now when you fly this approach, you have to meet a lot of criteria. You will need to have your flaps fully down, your gear down, your spoilers out, your hook down, and then you will need to have your auto throttle on. It does not control your speed, it controls your angle of attack. You cannot select what you want it to work to. It will automatically try and maintain 15 units angle of attack. So in order to engage that, you're generally in the variable ballpark of about 12 units angle of attack already, so you should be fairly slow. The second thing is Yes, it's an auto throttle, but it brings you right down close to some of the areas where there's handling difficulties with this aircraft in slow speed flight envelopes. There's a lot of deviation in terms of how it flies. It will pitch and wallow a little bit. Okay, so the other things we need to be aware of is the appropriate point to turn the autopilot on. You have to make sure your AFCS are all on, otherwise this is really going to struggle, but you'll have to figure out when to put your autopilot on. And the other thing is you need to have a rate of descent. You need to be within a certain criteria in terms of your positioning, yes. The main thing is that for flying a carrier descent profile, I've heard it described that the pilot's head has a 1 foot high deviation window to go through. And if it's, that 1 foot makes a difference between the one wire and a bolter, basically. So given all of that, we're working to very tight constraints. We're going to go out not much further now, because we are beneath glide slope. And what we're going to do is we're then going to turn around, we're going to prepare ourselves and go down. So as I say, you've got to have constraints in terms of angle of attack. You've got speed, which is controlled by the auto throttle with its angle of attack, which in effect it controls the angle of attack, which controls the speed. You've got to have your lateral, your vertical sort of bars in the right place. You've got to have a reasonable rate of descent, and you've got to have a good quality signal, and you've got to have the aircraft fully configured. So there's just a little bit to be thinking of. So what we're going to do now is we've got 300 knots, we're going to turn in. As we turn in, we're going to let the speed bleed off and help ourselves out early, put the speed brakes down. We're now below the gear limiting speed, so the gear can come down as well. Now as we come back down towards the flap limiting speeds, 225, flaps can start to come down as well. And we're going to need to introduce a little bit of power now to reduce that rate of loss of speed. So there we go. Now one of the other things I forgot to mention is that when you're doing this, it likes trim. You cannot give it control of your aircraft if you are not adequately trimmed, because basically what then happens is as soon as it takes control of the aircraft, it throws it around the sky and it gets really upset. So our speed, we've just gone up to 16 units of alpha. We really want to be about 15 at most. So here we come. Quite far out, so we've bust through our 160 just to get ourselves back on centre line. Now you can see the thick mark at the top by 160. That is our flight deck heading. That's our ILS heading. So really what we want to try and do now is we want to try and maintain centre line with the little ILS indicators coming through the total velocity vector, and we want to maintain our heading as close to 160 as we can. The reason being is that if we're at 160 and that's in the centre line, the only thing that's affecting us then is wind, and I do have wind enabled. It's slightly from the right, it's not much, but once you add in the carrier's movement, it works out somewhere in the region of about 30 knots, because the carrier in this thing is moving. If you had a stationary carrier, the theory is it would be easier. Not particularly. You need that wind because it reduces your ground speed. So still quite a way out now. So what we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves set up nice and early. Make sure our trim is appropriate. As I say, we're looking for an appropriate rate of descent, which for the weight we're at will be somewhere in the region of about 700 feet per minute. It is a 3-degree glide slope, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to get ourselves to a position. You can see we keep drifting left of our intended ILS line. I say ILS, ACL, automated carrier landing. Now you can see the vertical position. ACL ready it's got, you see, but we're not within range at the minute, so we're within the tolerance. You can see over here on the right hand side you've got the little green dot, which is you in reference to the flight path that you're needing to take, your intended flight path. So it's not early for an ACL ready, you don't normally get that. You won't get the top light until you're within about 10 miles. Right, landing, ACL ready. One thing I nearly forgot, make sure the hook's down. that can go to, where's it gone? Okay, now we can turn the autopilot on as well. And we're waiting for all the criteria now to be met. Rate of descent is far too high, so let's get the stick up a bit. Drifting slightly right of track. Hopefully the throttles can help us with this. There we go. Autopilot coupler light came on, press the button. Autopilot command control. Now I've got to watch this like a hawk. Watching. You can hear the throttle doing its business. You can see it's starting to pitch and wallow. We're really far down on the speed. It's low. It's trying to correct, look. So it's still low. Rate of descent has come right down. So it is correcting. It is holding. And this is now the thing, is it's all about monitoring this and seeing if it can stabilise itself out. Come on, stabilise yourself. Right, here we go. We're getting there. It's starting to get back on the right glide slope. We've got 8.99 miles to go. So this is going to be a long run in, so we can potentially view. There you go. There's the view. In fairness, not much of a view at the minute. But yeah, we'll see. Just make sure it's not going to throw us out the sky. Right, it's lined up nicely. I'm just going to have a quick look down into the cockpit. You can see the throttles working hard here. Now, they're basically trying to... This little marker here and these are for your angle of attack, as is this. And what you're aiming to do is fly down this glide slope at 15 units of angle of attack. Now, in order to change the angle of attack, you can do one of two things. You can change the pitch, or you can change the speed you're moving through the air. Now, normally with a jet aircraft, such as an airliner, you control your rate of descent by pushing forwards on the stick or pulling back on the stick. In essence, you drive your height change and you control your speed with the throttle. That's counter to what a lot of light aircraft do. Now, in carrier aircraft generally, they do the same as light aircraft. So you pitch for speed and you use throttle for rate of climb, rate of descent. This reverts back to jet, i.e. leave the throttle alone, it adjusts the angle of attack, you pointy, nosy, pitchy, steery. And really, that's the critical part of the system, is that it does differ from a manual landing. However, once you're engaged in it all, it doesn't really make much difference. So yeah, this middle mark here is 15 units angle of attack. This is what it's trying to line up with the glide slope marking, which is the wide line, and the total velocity vector, which is that bit in there. Meanwhile, you can hear the throttle going on and off. It's quite disconcerting. 5.5 miles. One of the things we need to do at this point is, if you want to know what a 3-degree glide slope is in terms of vertical speed, this is 132 knots, so you times it by 5. So times it by 10 is 1,300, divided by 2 is then 650. So you're looking for just over 650 feet per minute, and we've got that. So we know we're pretty much on a 3-degree glide slope. The other thing you can do is you can look at your rate of descent in terms of the actual movement here, and you can see if it tallies to what you're seeing here. You also need to look at your altitude. Make sure it's reasonable, bearing in mind our cloud base is down at 400 feet, and our speed is maintaining our speed. And now you can see actually there's not a lot of wind over the deck at the moment in terms of wind. The ship's moving, of course, so that means that the actual wind over the deck is going to be probably about 20 knots, maybe a little bit more. But the actual still air means we've only got a couple of knots actual airspeed, if that makes sense. You can see the rather disconcerting view of the sea coming in now. Got about 3 miles to go. It's 400 feet cloud base. We might not see the ship until about a mile to go. So have a quick look. Is there anything out there to see? Nope. Absolutely nothing. What are we at? We're at 2.8 miles. Still engaged nicely. It's still, it's hunting in the angle of attack, look, but it's still got the nice donut on the indexer. Still got all the lights engaged. Still appears to be doing what it says on the tin. We like this. 2.4 miles on the TACAN. Just about a minute to go. Let's have a look. There it is, look. There's your carrier. So should we have an atmospheric fly-in? I think we should. it's hard, guys, to get all of those things to line up. It's doubly hard to then do it in reduced visibility conditions. But it's got so many interlocks engaged with it. You've literally just got to keep going and going and going and practicing with it. Now, one of the things I've noticed is it's linked to the nose wheel steering button, which means that if you are consistently turning your nose wheel steering on and off on the ground, sometimes it causes difficulty with it engaging in the air. So, for example, for this trip, I've loaded it with already running, so I haven't had to use the nose wheel steering button. As a result, when I went to engage it, it engaged first time. So whether that's an issue that's something to do with me in controlling it or my sim, call the ball, visual the ball. That's that on the left hand side, by the way. That's your control indexer. Right, we're going to get ready. We're going to go back inside any minute now. Look at that. Nearly as good as me. And there we go, guys. That is one automated carrier landing in low visibility, hand flown all bar the actual landing itself. Now, as I say, approach criteria are very strict with this, so before it engages you will need to do the following. You will need to be down to an appropriate speed. You will need to have the following set up. You will need a VEC P3D to ACL, automatic carrier landing. Before it will capture, you need to manually fly it into the gate. You need to have your gear down, you need to have your hook down, you need to have your flaps down, and you need to be at an appropriate speed. You fly it to your gate, i.e. your entry point. As you get to your entry point, you need to then adjust your rate of descent to match the glide slope. You need to line yourself up, and once all of those criteria are met, you then need to do the following things. You need to turn your auto throttle all the way to on to control the speed. You need to make sure that once you're satisfied it's stable, turn your autopilot on, and then you can just tweak it manually, and once you get the light that comes on, the third light down, then you can engage it, and it should capture. If it doesn't capture, you've got to go around and do the whole thing again. So hope that's helpful, guys. There is a list of things in the manual that comes with the aircraft of how to do it. Even reading through that takes some practice. So yeah, use the TACAN, set up the instruments as I've done if you want to follow that. Fly you downwind. You're then looking at sort of 300 knots. Make sure your hook's down. Still flight manual. Do not use the autopilot, no matter how crappy the weather is. Do a long swooping left-hand turn into your intercept course to come in towards the landing system setup. You will need to do that switch there, as I say, to arm the ACL, so that you get your indications. You can bring up your shin as well. Once you've got all that, fly to the position where you're somewhere in here, and what you'll do is you'll get the white light. Once all the criteria are met of flaps down, gear down, hook down, the right sort of speed, and you've got everything set up in terms of instruments, it will then change light colours to give you the next light down. The next light down being the autopilot ACL autopilot coupler light. Autopilot on, auto throttle on. Make sure you've still got that light, and then press your nose wheel steer button to engage it, and cross your fingers. And that's really it, guys. I hope that helps. It's a heck of a subject to try and learn. It is just one of those things where you just keep practicing and practicing and practicing, and eventually it works. And you know, I'm fairly confident that I can mess around with this quite a bit now, so hopefully that's of benefit to you guys. If it is, please don't forget to tick like, share or subscribe, and feel free to leave some comments down below. I am not an expert on this. There's not a lot of literature out there about how to do this. Even the F-14 handbook I've got access to isn't explicit in how to do it. This is the kind of thing where it's pilot's operation notes in terms of the functions. So the handbooks you can get, the reading material you can get, explains the systems, but it doesn't explain how the pilot goes through that protocol of operating the systems. So a lot of this is touchy-feely, let's see how we get on, you know, small steps, build it up and see how we get on. That's how I fly it. It might not be operationally 100%, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please feel free, as I say, to tick like, subscribe or share, and I'll speak to you soon.